So we are going to do Supreme Jerk. It has extreme combat difficulty, which typically means you're going to miss a lot more. The damage is going to be a lot higher. So there's much less margin of error. Friendly fire is on also if you haven't played with this yet. Things like heavy machine guns, flamethrowers, grenades, they can all hurt your own team members. So you have to be careful where you position yourself. Make sure you're not next to someone who's about to use a flamethrower. So just requires you to be a little more careful, but it's also part of the fun of making it through these difficulty modes. And it's not hardcore, so if you die, your game's not over. It's harder to win battles is basically how it goes. So we're going to select this difficulty for the most fun. And it also fits in with our theme of jerky characters. But again, it's not a hardcore mode. If you're used to some other hardcore modes, that would mean, I think Diablo may have one, you play through as best you can, and if you die, it's over. That does not happen here. If you die, you can still use your quick saves or your auto saves or your manual saves. It just means combat's harder, it's less forgiving, and you can hurt your own people. So we'll skip over the cinematic, get into the character creation. If you have not custom character created before, they do give you some pairs. I never find it fun to use pre-existing pairs, as my name, OG Reroller, implies. I enjoy rolling characters and re-rolling characters, so I always jump right into custom character creation. They give you a male and female to start with some basic setup. We're going to skip over all this and just dive into what matters throughout the game. Identification is more for your own purposes. I'm going to go with my normal setup of the mime and the freak. So we're going to do the freak first in this case. You can pick whatever voice you want. This really doesn't matter at all, other than how they talk. And they don't talk that much in the game. They'll just have some lines that they throw out. Background does matter a little bit. You can see here they all have slight little bonuses. This is nice. It's not like QUIRK. QUIRK is optional, gives you a bonus and a negative at the same time. Background is not optional. If you stick with Bookworm, you get a 5% experience bonus, which is nice. If you're not drawn to any of these particular ones, you can just stick with that. A 5% experience bonus will always help you. Well, always until you reach max level, of course, which I think is level 50. But as you gain levels in the game, you have the option, the opportunity, I should say, to increase your attributes, which we'll get into. You have the ability to increase some skills, which can also give you some perks. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. So in this particular character, if you have not seen my Mime and Freak series yet, the Circus Freak is a really large circus clown that likes to carry a heavy weapon around. I've been putting him as Disciple of the Metal lately because it's a fun heavy metal riff. It also just seems like a cool giant heavy metal clown who's carrying a heavy machine gun around. So when you're into identification, that's really the only thing that will play into the gameplay at all. The name is just for your purposes. Gender is just how they're going to appear, and then the voice you can pick for when they speak. So background's the only thing that's going to give you a little change to your stats or your combat abilities. So not super important. Appearance is totally up to you. It doesn't matter. There's no hitboxes. Wasteland is a round-based combat system. So each of your party members will get a chance to move, attack, use skills per round. It's not an action RPG where you have to run around and try to shoot things and hit their hitboxes and all. It's all based on your hit percentages, your armor percentages, your damage amounts. So appearance is truly just for the fun of it. So for my freak character, I do change his hair around because he's a giant clown. So I give him lots of big red hair. Although this will change when I change to the QUIRK, you'll see. So I leave the beard off. Helmet, jacket, pants. This gives you options to change. You can put a helmet on. It covers everything you did with hair and face and beard. But I leave that off. Jacket doesn't matter. You can change the armor color as well. This will all get replaced optionally with gear. When you're in the game, if you get a new piece of equipment and put it on, you can toggle a little checkbox that shows you either the pants that you pick here or the pants that you're wearing, for instance, or if you get a helmet in the game, like if I got this helmet in the game, it would cover over my head even if I don't pick it here. Or if I put this on now, I can toggle off helmet and it'll just always look like that. So it gives you the option to always keep your appearance, or you can show this empowered appearance as you get better gear. Armor color is again just for your defaults. I'm not going to change that. Physique matters just for the look. So in this case, I have a gigantic, jacked clown. He's not a clown yet, but he will be by the end. And portraits just show up when you're picking your characters for your team, and it shows a little overview of your team. They're not important at all, other than to help you distinguish who your characters are. So this one is a big giant clown. So he's going to get the clown portrait. So you can see the starts of our big giant freak clown. The only thing that matters right now is Disciple of Metal. That gives him a little additional, what was the Disciple of Metal? Gives him more fire damage bonus, and since I will be having him use a flamethrower from time to time, that will come in handy. Starting weapon, I believe if you pre-ordered the game, you get a set of gold equipment. There's one of each weapon type that are better than all of these starting weapons. So if you have them in your inventory, this really doesn't matter at all, because the first thing you're going to do when you get into the game is swap out your starting weapon to what you have in your inventory. If you don't have those, then this will be what you start the game with until you find or purchase better weapons. And this is an important aspect of Wasteland. Even though we have attributes like strength and you have skill in your weapon, the damage that the weapon does is going to be totally based on the weapon that you have. How many action points it takes to use is also based on the type of weapon that you're using. And then your skill with the weapon is really going to determine if you can equip it at all, and it also modifies slightly your hit percentages. But if you want to be a sniper rifle user, for instance, they're going to give you a fairly crappy sniper rifle, and the only way you're going to do a lot more damage as a sniper is to find a better weapon. And usually in Wasteland, to find a really powerful weapon will require that you have 6 sniper skill, for instance, as opposed to starting with 2. So for now, it doesn't matter because all these weapons do not that great a damage. I'm picking heavy weapons, so he gets this heavy machine gun. But you'll see, I will swap this out immediately with the gold starting weapon. That is a lot better. But he's going to have his starting heavy weapon. It's important to remember what you picked because you want to make sure you give him... let's skip over attributes real quick. We'll go to skills. So for this example, big guns, it covers heavy machine guns and flamethrowers. You can see that here. Heavy machine gun hit chance goes up with your level, and flamethrower hit chance goes up with your level. That's really all that happens. You don't do more damage. You don't really have any additional benefit to having a higher skill in big guns other than being able to use better guns and having a higher chance to hit. What also happens along the way is it opens these perks up. So you can see if I upgrade to cost 1, I don't get any perks, but it allows me to use big guns without penalty. And then my second skill point will open up the option to have a perk called Move Up. Now, it's important to remember these perks are not granted immediately. If I have 2 skill in big guns and I get that perk, I still have to activate the perk with perk points. That's a lot to talk about. It'll make sense as you look through the game, but just remember that upping your weapon skill, or any skill for that matter, really only allows you to use it in more complex situations. It's the same with general skills. If you pick pick lock, which is a very important skill in Wasteland. Lock picking of skill 1 will let you pick locks of a difficulty of 1 or less. That's really all it does. If there's a lock that is locked at difficulty 3 and you only have skill of 2, you won't be able to open it. You have to up your skill to 3 or find someone who has that level of ability. So the level of your skill is very important, and it also forces you to make decisions because you can't up all of these skills to their highest level along the way, especially early game. 1 lockpick in your party will mean you can pick locks of 1. You don't need to have everybody have lockpick because it'll just use the highest level in your party. So it's important to spread out the skill points, especially in your first 2 characters. I would definitely recommend lockpicking for 1 person because you will run into a couple of locked items along the way. One thing I also have found useful is nerdy. Where's nerdy? Nerd stuff. Lets you hack one of the initial computers that will shoot one of the armored units and you get a little additional loot. Not a big deal. It also lets you hack computers later on, which you really won't get a chance to in the very beginning. So you can skip it. But we'll get into my choices for these 2 characters. Just wanted to point out that attributes here aren't going to make the skills stronger. The only one that really affects skills is intelligence. Every 2 levels of intelligence, you gain 1 skill point. So it's helpful to add intelligence, especially in the beginning. I like to put my intelligence up so that I can add additional skills. So having like 1 lockpick and 1 first aid, 1 explosives, all those things will come in handy very early on in the game. As you level up throughout the game, you can increase your intelligence, you'll get additional skill points. So then you can start adding things like toaster repair and energy weapons and skills that will come into play after the very beginning. You won't need energy weapons in the very beginning, for instance. So there's no need to waste a skill point there, unless you just really want to go with theme. And if you think your guy is into weird science and you want to jack it up, then that is fine too. It just won't be useful very early on. So we are going to build out the freak. I have started. Initially, I didn't go high in coordination, but one of the benefits of a high coordination, what's helpful here is as you hover over these, you'll see it tells you what it's going to do on the right. So 2, 4, 6, 8 coordination gives me 4 action points max and an additional 4 to start with. Status effect resistance is not as big a deal. There's not a lot of statuses in the beginning, but action points are really crucial because everything you do, as I was saying earlier, it's a round-based combat system. So you'll have a grid in combat. You can move your character around. Every movement along the grid uses up action points. Every skill that you use uses action points. Every weapon shot that you fire uses action points. So the more action points you have, the more you can do. A heavy weapon, for instance, his gun will take 6 action points to fire once. So he's not going to be able to fire twice in the initial rounds. But having more than 6 action points will allow him to defend or heal himself first, reload or fire all in one round. So it's very beneficial very early on, I believe, to up this coordination to 8. I don't think there's a need to go to 10. It's only 1 additional action point. But I found 8 to be a pretty good spot, and it still leaves me room to build out my other stats. So for the freak, he's going 8 coordination. He's going to split awareness and strength at 4. You can also turn down, even though it starts you out with 2s, you can move them down. 1 is the minimum, so I can't have 0 luck. But I've not found much use for luck early on. You can see it's only a very small percentage for luck. One of the benefits of having more than 1 luck is penetration will go up every 2 rounds, so every 2 levels of luck. So +2, +3, and what penetration does is it offsets armor, basically. So a penetration of 1 will help me get through 1 extra level of armor. Again, this is not a big deal because each of the weapons also have a level of penetration. So this isn't going to be very high for him. The flamethrower, although does I think have 99 penetration, but you don't meet very heavily armored people early on, so you don't have to worry too much about penetration in the very beginning. And the chance of you critting and getting a really high damage crit when you're only doing like 12 damage per shot is kind of inconsequential in the beginning. So I keep this at 1. I'm going to put awareness up to 4. He gets additional hit chance. Perception goes up, which helps him spot things. And then what comes into play mostly for him is this ranged damage bonus. He's going to be using a heavy machine gun, which is considered ranged. There's also melee, which is an option. So melee would be like a hammer or a blade, or brawling is also not ranged. And then there's explosives, which are rockets and grenades. So this will help his basically ranged gunfire do a little bit more damage. So 12% is pretty good, and the hit chance going up is always helpful. You don't want to waste your action points missing people and then having to take damage an extra round. I also put strength up to 4. What I have to do is move these down to 1, so I have more points available, and then I can move strength up to 4. Unlike a typical RPG, or maybe RPGs that are of a different type of genre, strength does not mean you'll immediately do a ton more damage. It will come in handy, but as I had shown you with attributes, the damage done relies on the weapon being used. So your skills are going to allow you to use certain levels of weapons that do more damage on their own. They all have damage ranges, so strength isn't going to all of a sudden double my output of ranged combat. But what it does do is add a base constitution. So I have a constitution of 25. You can think of constitution as hit points. When your constitution goes to 0, you're knocked out. And then if you're knocked out for a certain number of rounds, you basically die, although you can be revived in combat or after combat. Con per level means each level that your character gets, they will get an additional 6 con. So this is pretty interesting to take early on. For the first 2 or 3 levels, I'm going to be getting 6 instead of 3, so basically doubles my con per level at 4. Throwing range, he is going to be my explosives user. Explosives gives you access to not only rocket launchers, but grenades. So having a larger throwing range will mean he can, most of the time, not have to move to throw a grenade into a group of enemies. And then strength, as it says here, it can equip items requiring 4 strength. You will, pretty early on actually, run into armor that you can only equip with strength of 5 or higher. So one of the first things you do want to do if you're worried about armor is to bump your strength up. So I'm going to stick at 4. If you've noticed the pattern here, every 2 levels is when you get an additional perk. I shouldn't call it perk because there are perks, but you get an additional bonus. So con per level in this case goes up. Speed, I believe I keep speed at 1. Speed isn't like your ability to attack first, although initiative, right here, the initiative percentage is your chance of going first in combat. So it's helpful, but it doesn't mean the end of the world. A lot of times you'll find the combat begins pretty far apart, and your characters have to move, and the enemies have to move into position. So getting the first round, it can be helpful to take one person out. A lot of times if you're running into a non-combat situation, you can initiate by firing at someone, and then combat will start. So it's not super important in the very beginning. Evasion is just your chance to not be hit. And there's no really big perk to going up in multiple speeds here. So I'm going to keep him at 1. I am going to move intelligence up to 2 because of the additional skill point that you get. Some of these other things, critical chance and critical heal chance, not going to come into play in the very beginning. It's all a percentage of your actual chance and then a percentage of your damage. So a small percentage of a small amount of damage is not a lot. So I do want that additional 1 skill point, and now I'm out of points to customize my attributes. So this is how I do my freak character. 8 coordination, only 1 in luck. The 4 awareness for the extra range damage, the 4 strength for the constitution gains and the ability to add stronger armor. Minimum 1 of speed, 2 intelligence for the skill point, and then a minimum charisma. I just don't have skill points left here. Charisma is kind of useful. Not only do you get an additional experience bonus, but you get leadership range, which if you do have the leadership skill, it increases like hit chance, for instance, for your party members that are near you. So higher charisma means your party members can be further away and still get that leader bonus, and you do gain more experience. And from what I've seen, these are pretty significant gains in 2% to 5% experience gain. You will certainly level up faster than the rest of your party. So that's his build right now as far as attributes. We will jump into skills. So because I added intelligence, I have 4 skill points to use up here. If I upped my intelligence more, I do that later in the game with I believe my 3rd or 4th member. I've been making a mechanic / healer, so I bump intelligence all the way up, and I can add a whole bunch of skill points that way. But as you level up in the game, you will get, I think it's 3 each level, you'll get 3 skill points because of the intelligence, so you have a chance to bump these skills up pretty early on. So what you want to make sure you do in the very beginning is at least give yourself 1 point in the weapon that you've chosen. So if I gave myself 2 melee and I picked heavy weapon, it's not really going to be helpful. I'm not going to be able to use that heavy gun. I'm going to have to stick to melee combat until I get more skill points. Excuse me. So in this case, I have a big gun, and I'm going to move it up to 2. The perk is not that important because you have to be able to turn that on, which you can do later in the game. So you could stick with 1 here if you really wanted to allocate 1 other point. The main thing you'll miss out is the additional hit chance. So I think I go with 2 here. And then I feel like, let's see. For him, I go explosive. Explosive's not only helpful for throwing grenades, but you do get to disarm landmines and traps. And right from the beginning of this game, you will run into traps and landmines. So this is very helpful early game skill. In my opinion, the 2 best early game skills that are not weapon skills are 1 in explosives and 1 in lockpicking, because you will also run into a bunch of things that are locked that you need to pick. And for your lockpick, I would definitely recommend every level up to at least bump it up by 1, because as you progress in the game, lockpicking is going to go from 1 to 2 to 4, 5, and you're going to be locked out of places. So he's going to be my explosive user, my mime character. The other person in my initial party is going to be my lockpick. And again, it's really only a level. It's not based on dexterity, it's not based on speed. If I have the right explosives level, I can disarm the trap. That's 1, or this is 2 or less. So if there's one that's 4, I'm just going to blow it up. So I pick 1 here, and then the other thing I give him, he's a big, nerdy, explosive clown. So I give him nerd stuff, which you do get to use in the initial tutorial, if you want to call it that, the tutorial battles. There's 1 computer you can hack, so you don't have to avoid the walking mech, and you can actually loot it once it kills it for you. If you don't take this, you can't hack that in the beginning, but you can just walk where it can't see you, so that you don't get stuck. It's fine. In fact, if you've never played Wasteland before, they do a very good job of giving you a way around not having a skill. It's always helpful to have the skill. It's usually beneficial, like toaster repair even. You'll run into some toasters. If you can't repair them, not a big deal, but you get some stuff if you do. Same thing with lockpicks. It's usually not a main mission of the game that you can't get through if you're stuck without a lockpicking skill. There's usually a way around it. Maybe it requires picking up an NPC in your group. Maybe it requires blowing something up instead. They do a very good job of supporting your choice. So if you don't want to have a lockpick because it just doesn't fit in your theme, you'll be fine. You'll be able to get through the game. You might just struggle, or you'll miss out on certain things, but that's part of the trade-off that you make. So I do enjoy that. I've always liked that about Wasteland, that I can build characters that I like. And even though I may be penalized by not having certain things, I'm not stuck. You don't ever get to a point where you just cannot move forward because you didn't take lockpicking 6. So it's pretty good. And plus you have the ability in the game to up your skills. So if you do want to start adding more skill points to it later, or you run into something and you're like, oh, I only have 3 lockpicking, I want it to be 4, you can go gain some experience, level up, and then upgrade your lockpick. So you have a ton of options. There's also equipment that you can find along the way that will boost skills. And there are skill books that you can find and read. If you do find a skill book, however, and it's in a skill that you plan on maxing, I would recommend holding off, because the way this works is the upgrade cost goes up significantly as you get higher level. It's not always 1. So you can see to make it 1, it's a cost of 1, but it's a cost of 28 to make it. So it goes from 22 to 28. So that last one, it's actually 6 whole skill points. So if you get a skill book and you use it initially, it's only worth 1 skill point. If you wait until the last 1 or 2 levels, it's actually going to be worth 6 whole skill points for you. So if you can be patient and you find a skill book that you like, really hold off until you're about to max that skill out. Just a suggestion. So for him, he only has 4 skill points, so we're going to go 2 in big guns, 1 explosives for the grenades and for the landmines, and then nerd stuff, just because I think that fits well into his theme. And then the quirk is the final piece of character creation. Quirks are optional. I have fun creating custom characters, and there's a quirk option, so I'm always going to pick a quirk because I find it fun. But the only thing about quirks is that in addition to something positive for your character, they all come with something negative. Some negatives are worse than others, so it's really up to you. If you really just want to dive into your theme, kind of like I am here, I said this was a big circus freak that looks like a clown, so when you pick this, one of the downsides is that you have a clown costume. You can wear equipment and override and eventually not look like a clown, but the fun of this is you can also turn off all the equipment and always look like a clown, which is what I intend to do. So what you get as part of this quirk is combat speed increase, slight, and critical resistance increase, and then the trade-off for that is your evasion goes down, and then your detection time goes down as well. Which I think detection time is if you get into range of combat, the enemies will notice you and start combat faster. Whereas if your detection time was a little higher, you could run up almost right in front of them and stab them or shoot them. Since he's using a heavy machine gun, I don't plan on him being evasive, and I don't plan on him running straight into combat. We can really shoot from afar, so this works out pretty well for his character. So with the quirk and the background and his appearance, now we have this giant freakish circus clown, and that is the freak.